Happy Saturday evening. Happy Saturday evening. Thank you for being here. This is the postponed episode of When Life Needs a Detox. I am Kara White. I am your life detox strategist, and I am here to give you the postponed version. I don't like to go a week without it unless I'm just so sick I cannot do the episode. But I had issues with my computer. It needed to update, and it took about 6 hours. But we are here. I am grateful that you are here, and I am so glad to see another day. Had to turn that light off. Couple of things. Number one, I hope everybody had a great Juneteenth yesterday, June 19th. I hope you celebrated the actual Emancipation Day of Black Americans in this country. Number two, I want to thank my Facebook family and friends. You guys made me feel so loved and appreciated on my birthday. It was June 17th, and I mean to tell you, the outpouring of love was just awe-inspiring, and it was humbling. And it is even still humbling because I am still getting birthday wishes today. I just love you guys so much. Thank you. Thank you. Now, before I get started on this episode of When Life Needs a Detox, and this week's topic is racism and its true origins, I need to address some comments that were made about last week's episode. I said we need to start looking at how our history is recorded to make sure that when our history is recorded, hold on, I got stuff popping up all over my screen here, and it is being ridiculous. I can't believe this. All right. So, let me see. I am so sorry about this, you guys. Okay, fine. Update the driver then. Alrighty. Well, I'm going to keep talking, but last week we had a few people that were very upset with what I had to say about us recording our own history. And essentially what they told me was I was off my rocker. Who did I think I was? Adolf Hitler for wanting to manage information. There was one gentleman, Mr. Stutes. Actually, I enjoyed having a conversation with Mr. Stutes because his whole thing was there are more whites killed by police officers than blacks. And Mr. Stutes was kind enough to provide me with information on the statistics that he looked up. Now, I couldn't tell where he got his information because the name of his website was covered up with some other materials, so it was kind of hard to read it. But he also ended his statements to me with, "You know, all lives matter." And Mr. Stoops, I want to thank you so very much for writing in and giving me your opinion. I like facts. I do enjoy facts. I do. The only thing that I can say is, yes, those statistics looked impressive, but the real gist behind Black Lives Matter were the fact that there are more black men and women killed at the hands of white officers, white seemingly racist officers. Now I know there's people are going to have a problem with the seemingly part, but at the hands of white officers that are, let's just say, they're not necessarily racially astute. How's that? And I don't think that we can compare the Black Lives Matter movement unless you can tell me or show me where there are white people being killed by racist black officers. All lives matter. I will never say that there's a life that God created that does not matter. Yes, all lives matter, but what we are talking about is specifically black men and women dying at the hands of white officers. And if we are going to compare them, we need to compare them, I think, on that level, because then we can have a true comparison, a true apples and oranges comparison between who's dying by whose hand. And I'm sure you and I are going to have another discussion about this, and it's okay. Mr. Stutes, I enjoyed the conversation, so I do look forward to you giving me another opinion, and it won't be a bad thing. You and I just need to have another discussion. And I have to tell you this about Mr. Stutes. Mr. Stutes, as passionate as he was about what he had to say, was one of the most respectful comments that I got on that. And Mr. Stutes, I want to thank you so very much for being that respectful, for having that level of respect for me and what I had to say without coming at me sideways. Let's see, like I said, I was Hitler because I wanted to dictate how black history was viewed, and then somebody came at me and says, well, who's supposed to keep history? Who's supposed to keep up with your history? You? Well, of course I should. This is my history. This will be my history, and I should keep up with it. And while I'm not overly happy, as a matter of fact, I'm not happy at all with the criminality that goes with protests, the rioting and the looting. I'm just not there. But I understand the passion behind it as far as rioting is concerned. Now, the looting, y'all just straight up criminals. Looting had nothing to do with George Floyd's death. Looting had to do with the criminal mind. That's just that. But as far as history is concerned, everyone, every ethnicity, every faith has their own version of history. Now, when we start talking about history, and we talk about now I'm going to get into today's topic, which is racism and its true origins. Now, when we start talking about keeping up with history, I think we need to look at racism from a historical point of view. And racism didn't start in the 1600s. It didn't start in the 1500s. We have to, even in the 1400s, where they give the official start of racism. The history of racism actually started with the Holy Wars, specifically right around 1095, and that was when the Roman Catholic Church decided to take the Roman Catholic faith around the world, and they wanted to reclaim Jerusalem. As they said, it was the birthplace of Christianity, and they wanted to reclaim it from the Muslims. because they said that was theirs. That was the birthplace of their faith, and they wanted to take over their birthplace and eliminate all other faiths to make Christianity the predominant faith of the entire world. Now that's good in theory, but like I said, the Muslims held Jerusalem. But the Muslims of 1095 are not the same Muslims that you think of right now. Because I know everybody's running around talking about bow ties and beating pies. No. That's not the Muslim faith that we're talking about. Back in those times, in medieval times, the Muslim faith was made up of many faiths. There was more than the Muslim faith. There was the Judean faith, and you have to understand the Judean faith had 12 tribes. So you're talking about 12 different tribes of Judean faith. And if you think about it, we have the Jehovah Rapha, Jehovah Nisi, Jehovah Jireh. There's everyone called their God by a different name. The Muslims use the word Allah. So for them, the Mecca of all faith was Jerusalem. And all faiths were welcome to come and worship in Jerusalem. It belongs to all faith because all faith began in Jerusalem. Now, for the Roman Catholics, this was the Holy War. For the Muslims, it was an invasion. So there's a different slant to history because the Muslims do not record these wars, and there were 9 wars for Jerusalem. They don't record any of these wars as holy wars. They were invasions and insurrections. The Catholic Church called it the Holy Wars. So there's a difference between how history is seen. Now, the reason I'm saying that the first Holy War, number 1 Holy War, was won by the Roman Catholic, by the Knights Templar. They went in and they took Jerusalem. But it wasn't just the going in there. What it was that there was an uprising. There was let's see, let me make sure I got this right. Y'all know I can't keep up with stuff. And it started because the Seljuk Turks took control of the Holy Land and they massacred 3,000 Christian pilgrims. But that's not to say that all of these pilgrims were from England or Rome, but they were Christian. And these Turks did massacre the Christians. Now, Pope Urban II in 1095 pleaded with the Council of Clermont and persuaded them to approve a holy war against the Muslims in order to avenge the deaths and halt the Turks' expansion of the world stage. But here's the thing. The Muslims actually controlled 2/3 of the known world at that time. So they came and they piggybacked on this insurrection, this internal civil war, and they got Jerusalem. In the 8 holy wars subsequent, the Roman Catholic Church lost control of Jerusalem and it went back to the Muslims. And even with that, because the Muslims were so accepting of different faiths, they actually incorporated certain elements of the Roman Catholic faith. There was an exchange of information as far as religion, medicine, philosophy. It also opened up trading routes between, England and Rome and the Muslim territories. But here's how the church got involved and originated racism. Now, there was a theologian, Bernard of Clairvaux, and he co-wrote the rule for the Order of the Templars. In these rules, he decreed that the killing of a Muslim was not actually homicide, but malicide. Malicide, in his definition, was the extermination of incarnated evil. It wasn't the killing of a person. The Muslims, the Islam, and the prophets were then vilified in numerous creative ways. And the one thing that they were able to do was to say that because of the darkness of their skin, they were inferior and they needed to be controlled or eliminated. Which is why in our English language, anything that is black, that is dark, is considered evil. That was the start of racism. I don't think they meant it. They just needed a reason to be able to go in and say, hey, we need what they have. We want what they have. Let's get it this way. Now, what I'm going to do, because I know that people don't like to have this kind of information without knowing where it comes from, and I don't blame you, but I'm going to, in my feed, give you all of the information and all of my sources. I'll be more than happy to include them, and you'll be able to understand. History depends on, number one, who's writing it, and their viewpoint. It depends on who won, who lost, and how they saw what happened. Yes, as African Americans, we must be vigilant and we must be careful as to how our history is recorded. I'm not saying that a white person couldn't record it just as well, but it's ours. We need to make sure of how we are seen in history. And as far as us keeping our own history, we've always done that. You want to know about our history? Read Why We Can't Wait by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You want to read about our history? Look up any book on the contributions of African Americans in this country. We, as African Americans, have the right to record our own history. And racism dictates that we do this, because the systematic racism in this country alone would have the world believe that we are still less than human. And all of this started with one statement back in the 11th century that said Muslims by virtue of the color of their skin were not human, and they were incarnate evil, and that they must be destroyed. And that is why you have, even in the Bible, where those of darker races must either be eliminated or controlled. That is why in our English language, anything that is considered black, dark, is automatically evil. We have to change the narrative. And I want to thank you guys so very much for coming on and hanging out with me on a Saturday evening at 6 o'clock. And you've hung with me for almost 21 minutes. So let's wrap this up. My name is Carol White. I am your life detox strategist. Thank you so very much for attending. I love you to the moon and back. And When Life Needs a Detox will be next week at its regularly scheduled time. I'll see you on Thursday. Bye-bye now.